Welcome everybody. Stephanie here. Super. That was just a Stephanie moment. Super excited to be back with you guys. We are back with another podcaster interview. Now, you guys know the reason I started these was because as I started going on more podcasts, I realized this before I started going on the podcast, but podcasters are actually really fascinating. They're running a podcast, which is basically a business. They're running a business most of the time too. And I started thinking, how cool would it be if we could have the opportunity to sit down with some of the really, truly the top podcasters, right? The people who are running podcasts that actually get downloads and listens and have an audience that loves hearing from them and follows them closely. Because anyone can have a podcast, but not everyone can have a podcast with an audience. I'm excited to have Rich here with me today. He's the host, I think he's the producer too, I didn't even ask, of Agents of Change podcast. If you haven't, you have to check out this podcast. It's hilarious. I love it. It always starts with almost like a secret agent, obviously, secret agent like style intro. I think it's a fantastic, and he does a great job of bringing in practical application. So today I've got Rich here. I want to bring some practical application for you guys on how do you grow your business. Rich, welcome to the YouTube channel.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity coming on here. This is awesome. I have not had this like reverse interview before, so thank you.
I'm happy to be the first. I don't know many people who are doing this. I just thought, hey, if I've got like the podcaster's attention, I should do something.
It's a great idea. Yeah.
So let's give the audience a quick overview. Who are you? What's the business? And what prompted you to start a podcast?
All right. So my company, my digital agency is Flight New Media. We're up in Portland, Maine. And for the past 24 years, we have been designing websites, doing search engine optimization, and perhaps for not quite as long, doing things like email marketing, social media, and basically just helping our clients reach more of their ideal customers online. And the podcast, I actually have two podcasts. So you are on the Agents of Change podcast, which is my main podcast. This podcast, we're almost up to episode 400. We've been doing it for about 8 years or so. So it's something I've definitely invested a lot of time and energy into. And then I've got what I might call more of a niche podcast as well, called Fast Forward Maine. And that's broader in terms of the topic. It's about everything you need to grow your business, but it does have a very Maine-centric focus, in part because I'm partnering with a local bank that's positioning themselves as a business bank, not just a retail bank, and they wanted content to support that. So I love both the podcasts, but for different reasons.
That's brilliant. I love that one that you've got the partnership. I think a lot of people do podcasts without ever turning it into, without ever actually getting it monetized. I know for years, my mom and I had a podcast that we did together, we co-hosted, and we never really monetized it. And I think that becomes a very key piece is if you're going to do the podcast, there has to be a point to it. So I love that you've pulled that off with the new one. And now I'm super curious to check it out because I've never been to Maine, but I'm fascinated by Maine. Blueberries and lobsters and
all that good stuff.
I know. I know. So what made you go, oh my God, 8 years ago, I need to start a podcast? Like what craziness entered your brain?
I was going to Blog World. It's actually not my first podcast. So I did start a podcast back when they literally were first starting, and I absolutely hated it. It was called Flightcast. I was spending doing everything myself, not an interview style show. I was spending 6 to 8 hours to maybe get a 10-minute podcast out there, and I just didn't enjoy it. I much more preferred the written word at that point. So that failed. I shouldn't say it failed. I actually used to get some emails on when is your next episode going to come out? I'm like, never. I'm done.
I hate it.
Right. And then I started going to Blog World, which then became New Media Expo, and really brought in the whole podcasting component. They bought a podcasting conference, brought it all in, and a lot of bloggers at that point were also moving into podcasting. My mentor at the time was Michael Stelzner of the Social Media Examiner. He had just started a podcast. He was really thinking that it would be a good move for me too. And I was like, well, I like the idea of interviewing people. Really, now the pressure's on them to be good. I just have to ask the right kind of questions, right? So it was less work, and there's so many benefits, and we can go into them. But that was really going and seeing the podcasters and talking to people who are enjoying creating content in this way got me thinking like this could be something really interesting for me and a great opportunity to connect with other people. So that was the impetus of the beginning of it was actually called the Marketing Agents for the first 100 episodes. And then, but I also had the conference called the Agents of Change. And I also had Flight New Media. And I realized like I have too many brands that do the same thing. So I merged the Marketing Agents podcast and basically rebranded it into the Agents of Change podcast.
So out of curiosity, I think this is going to become one of the questions I ask every podcaster from now on. What kind of businesses do you think should and shouldn't start a podcast? Like, when does it make sense to be a podcaster? When does it not?
There are probably specific industries that lend themselves better to podcasting than others. But I don't know that it's necessarily just about the industry. I mean, first of all, you've got to have the passion and the time. So for me, I listen to a lot of books on tape and podcasts, but to be honest, I listen to more books on tape than I do podcasts these days. So auditory learning is part of what I do. So for me, teaching this way and also learning, because I learn a lot when I interview people like you and other experts I've had on the show, is just a great way of me learning. So it makes sense for me to kind of create this content. I think if you're looking to be some sort of thought leadership, I think that there's, if you've got a service-based product, if you've got something that needs a little bit of education, or if you want to write a book and do more public speaking, all those are reasons why a podcast might be a really good fit for you.
I love it. And I love how you were really clear about like service-based, but it's not just service-based, because what if you happen to make the coolest mug ever and you want to educate people on why your mug is 3 times as expensive as everyone else's, and so you make a whole podcast about pottery, or I don't know, but like it's the education aspect to it. So I think
so. If that were the case, I might question the person, say, I'm not saying don't do a podcast, but how much do you have to say about why yours should be this much more expensive? And might that not be a better video that you would use on YouTube and your website and something else? So I don't know that podcasting in that case would be where I'd want to go, but I might, if my passion is around ceramics, I might talk about ceramics, and then maybe I would make the sponsor of my podcast this very expensive mug that I'm selling. So it's not that you can't do it, but it's like, if it's something that needs to be shown, and we definitely have clients who have a more demonstrable product, then podcasting isn't always the right answer. So it's not for everybody. And if you don't like doing it, or if your audience doesn't know what a podcast is, obviously you're not doing it for business reasons. And certainly there's a lot of hobbyists out there, and more power to you. But at the same time, if you're doing it for your business, then you need to know that your audience is actually out there, that there's enough for you to talk about on a regular basis that they'd be interested. Unless the other option you might do is you might create a series, a podcast season or couple seasons, and then just have it available for all time, but you're not actually adding to it. So that might be another way of onboarding people, is that you treat a podcast almost like as a series that people would get to, and they'd get to the end of it, and then they'd be done.
I've seen some of those, and it kind of makes me think of like Netflix did with The Queen's Gambit, where it was a limited series. So there was like clearly no additional seasons coming. It was just a standalone. So I think that could, and then you could put a little bit more time into really producing that and making it really stand out. So that's
absolutely. And there's a bunch of ways that you could share that content, but why not put it up to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all these other tools, all these other channels and platforms that are just going to reach another audience for a minuscule amount of additional work.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So let's shift gears a little bit. Building a business, an agency, a marketing agency, not a particularly easy field to grow a real business. I say a real business, like a substantial business. It's very crowded. You got people who are constantly undercutting you because they're cutting corners or they don't know. So,
or they're new and hungry.
Right. Yeah. Right. I'll do it for half price. What would be, thinking in terms of hyper competitive industries, for someone who's sitting here going, I'm in a hyper competitive industry, what would be your best piece of advice to that business owner for their marketing, since marketing is your realm of genius?
It's so funny that you asked me this question right now, because I'm in the middle of taking a course called Heroic Public Speaking, and I'm working on a brand new presentation, which working title is The Art of Remarkability. So the whole point of this presentation is that marketing is really tough if you don't do this first step. And the first step is to identify what makes you remarkable. Now, some people use different phrasing around this. some people are afraid, like I could never be remarkable. And my whole point is remarkable just means that you are noteworthy enough to be remarked upon. And so I actually have this formula called find, focus, fashion, and frame, which are basically 4 lenses you can use on your own company to identify what makes you unique or what makes you remarkable. And in the presentation, I kind of go through each of these. I don't think we have time to go through them right now, but and the whole idea is identify what makes you remarkable, what makes you different. And once you do that, then your marketing becomes much easier. And actually all the algorithms that power search and social and digital ads all start to line up to support you. But the whole thing is, just because you think that maybe there are 10 other coffee shops in your neighborhood, or maybe there's 100 other pizzerias, or maybe there's 10,000 other people who are keynote speakers on resilience. There's something about you that you can create that's remarkable. And so that's the thing, is you can't compete in a crowded marketplace. So you need to change the rules and the parameters so suddenly you're the only one doing what you're doing, or you have something that is so different than what everybody's offering that other people are taking notice. And it's a challenge to identify that, but once you do, you have something really awesome to build upon.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is the number one hiccup people run into, where they don't have any differentiator. And I think it stems from a couple of places. One, not really knowing your business well enough. But the other place I see it stem from a lot of times is fear of alienating potential clients.
Oh
right?
yeah,
The
absolutely.
idea of, if I become for me, right, there was this shift we made last year where I was, okay, look, I'm the violin wielding psychology of business speaker. Like, let's talk, right? Everyone's like, what? But it's super differentiated. And it means I'm not a fit for every podcast, every speaking gig. And I think people have this fear, like, oh my God, but if I embrace the violin, like, people won't want me on their stage, right?
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? How does someone who's sitting here going, but Rich?
It is scary to niche down. And that's like one of the 4, the focus, the idea that you continue to niche down, as John Lee Dumas says in his recent book, you niche down until it hurts, like until you're really scared that you've given away too much. But when you are the only one, you're the only one who's talking about the psychology of marketing, who can play violin, which you do on stage, then suddenly there's no competition for you. And if you're doing a good job, people are like, you got to bring in Stephanie. She does an amazing job and she's going to play violin. Everybody's going to be talking about it. So, and just because you've narrowed down to say, like, I am the best digital agency that focuses on Facebook ads for cat lovers in Maine, or whatever it is that you do to really like narrow it down, it doesn't mean that a cat lover from New Hampshire isn't going to see you and be like, I don't care that I'm not in Maine, I'm still going to hire you. Or a dog lover from Maine, or a dog lover from Texas, or just somebody sees the work that you're doing and is like, I'm going to hire you. I know I might not be your ideal customer, but I still want to hire you. You can decide to take that job or not. But when you become the best in as narrow a niche as possible, you start to attract people all over, because they're like, these guys are killing it. I got to find out what they're up to.
I 100%. And I had another question I was going to ask that I was really excited to hear your answer to, and now it stepped out of my head. It was along the lines of, oh, well, it may or may not come back. But I know we're rapidly chewing through our time here. So I do want to ask, I'm big on giving people something to go do. I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we listen to podcasts, we go to videos, we go through all this stuff, and we end up with to-do lists. I need to research this. I need to think about that. What is something that they can go do today? Like the one thing that you think is probably the most important that they need to go do today to move their business forward, to grow their business, to improve their marketing?
Nobody likes to hear the 2 words, it depends. But it really does depend on some level, because obviously different people are going to be in different stages, have different problems. Maybe somebody needs to work on their conversion on their website. Somebody else needs to improve their SEO, whatever the case may be. But since we've already talked about it, I would say that the number one thing that everybody can do is do a better job of identifying what makes them remarkable. So really digging down, like, is it something that's already in your business? That's the fine. So what are you already doing well, and why do people keep choosing you? Is it focus, that whole idea of niching down that you and I were just talking about? Is it fashion, where you create something that's not intrinsic to your offering, but it's related, like a podcast, right? Nobody has to listen to my podcast to hire Flight New Media or vice versa, but those 2 things are in alignment. They're both about digital marketing and getting more clients? Or is it Frame, where you just basically change the way that people look at your business so suddenly they're talking about you as well? So whatever lens you use, or use multiple lenses, but really get clear on what makes you different than everybody else in your industry serving a specific audience. And I think from there, all the other pieces start to fall in line.
Gorgeous. I love it. This has been awesome. I feel like you and I could probably talk for, well, we did already talk for almost an hour. Which if you guys want to check that out, you're going to have to go follow the Agents of Change podcast and watch for when my episode launches. That's all I'm going to say. It was a lot of fun, and we talked about some really good, juicy stuff. Rich, this was fantastic. Thank you for taking time to sit down with me today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate it.
So for all of my listeners out there, watchers, viewers, all of you guys, you know I love you guys. I think you're amazing. You have, and I can honestly, earnestly say, we as human beings have amazing potential, but what you choose to do with that potential makes all the difference. So find one thing, just one thing you heard today, and go make it happen. And if you need some help, we'll drop some links so you can connect with Rich below. We'll drop some links so you can connect with me below. Whatever, we're here for you guys. We truly want to see you succeed. Go make it a great day.